All right. I think everything is going. This might be the first time we've pulled it off without a technical glitch at the beginning. We must have been, graced by the tech gods today. Thanks for everybody for
I did a little hacking.
Yeah. In the system.
Yeah.
So guys, this is episode 100 of Bad Publicity. Who would have thought? It's made so far. We really appreciate everybody for coming out. And I'll say it right off the beginning. If you're not subscribing, please subscribe, because I always forget to say that. I say it at the end after everyone's disconnected. Because of the 100th episode, we've reached through. He was really hard to lock down. I had to go through his agent and his agent's agent and talk to like some publishing teams and get back. And it was email exchanges galore. But finally, we're graced here by Lukas. Thank you very much for taking the time out.
Glad I could make it. You can send the check to my publicists. I think there's a couple of zeros on the end of that one, right?
Yeah, I know.
Oh my God.
It was a bank breaker, but make sure you don't cash it till next Monday. It's post dated. And it is in Canadian, so
that's fine. I will accept donations and payment in any form of money, even credits. I'll take credits.
Oh my God.
What a theme tie-in there. Hollis, so we're here with Lukas, and you want to open up with anything?
No, I mean this. I would like to just to say this is actually awesome. As a huge fan of the game, I really am excited to have you on the show. I know that everyone else that's currently watching and will be listening later enjoys your input. A lot of times we have a lot of questions, gripes, and compliments in regards to this game that you and your team have so well crafted, in my opinion. And it's nice that you're willing to jump in on occasion to speak with this, the social aspect of the community, to give your opinion, answer questions and give your thoughts as to what everyone else is thinking. That does a lot for the community, and we appreciate having you here. Thank you so much.
Yeah, for sure. I think this is the first, you're a pretty accessible guy. You're always on your Twitter and stuff like that, and at Worlds, you got like a little entourage of that's hanging with you there, but you never shy away if someone comes up and starts talking about the game, because it's probably a passion thing, right? But
oh yeah, definitely love talking about the game.
Yeah, but this is the first time I think you've done a full live stream big chat thing.
This is the first time we've done it live.
Nice.
We're on a 10-second delay, right? I can just push a button and just leave stuff out that I'm not supposed to say.
Yeah,
is that how this live thing works?
Yes,
I think so.
Yes,
I think so.
Okay, excellent, good. Yeah, no, it's awesome talking to people who love the game, and I don't expect everybody to agree with all my opinions. They are my opinions, and I happen to be in a position where my opinions do end up mattering a bit when it comes to the future of the game. But yeah, it's awesome to talk to people who love the game, and it's been amazing. Just the amounts of support that people have been thrown into tournaments, and the community that has arisen around the game. Like, I've seen such good friendships even form over the game, and almost never bad blood, rivalry, spat, whatever is going to come out of the tournaments, that it's going to bring people closer together rather than farther apart, and that's just awesome.
Yeah, I totally agree. As I'm watching the number of people that are live watching slowly tick up here, we just want to lay some ground rules. We are going to be monitoring the chat for questions and stuff to throw out there. The only thing that we ask is that you understand that if you say something totally foolish and negative, we're not going to repeat it. We didn't. Lukas is not.
You must protect me.
Yeah.
See no evil.
I'm the was like the publicity shield, like in whoever that person was in Entourage movie.
Don't feel like that you can't. Don't be afraid. I would say also don't be afraid to ask your question. But the idea here is that regardless of how passionate you are about the game, everyone here, we're all human beings.
Yeah.
So if it, at the very least, phrase your question in a way that isn't so hostile, and it's very likely we'll pick it up. We'll try our best to ask it. Hopefully I don't miss anybody, and if I do, I'm so sorry.
Right, and you've got your full FAQ encyclopedia hat on, ready to answer any rule disputes, right?
Oh God.
Maybe. Well, I think that hat's around here somewhere. I might be able to find it.
Perfect. So let's jump into talking about so how much veto power. You talked about your opinions and stuff does matter, but do you have the official last and final say? Do you gold stamp everything? The double L? Like they put something on your desk and you're like approved?
Right. That's a good question. I mean, it never really comes down to that. Like I think everybody's pretty reasonable, and we discuss things and we kind of come to an agreement. Myself, Damon, Eric Dahlman, Dan Clark. Like there's a lot of people who jump in at the process at various times. Zoe Robinson from the art department, and even like Michael Silsby or Mercedes from the graphic design team. And so we get on the same page usually pretty early on. And if there is a disagreement, I mean, I guess in most cases, we come to an agreement about a card or an ability or the way that something is presented mutually. But I wouldn't say I have like veto power per se.
You want to be careful of like what you say to those questions, right? When you got to see these people in the office tomorrow.
Right. That's right. Everyone's opinion is appreciated. Now,
is
we
that
we take it all under advisement.
Now I know you listed a big list of people there, and I know you've said in the past that Dan works closely with you on for the IP stuff.
Yep, flavor.
I think it's really crazy how flavorful this game is. Can you just talk about like the steps mostly from going from like the idea to the card? Like, do you guys come up with like this flavor first? Like, does he run into your desk and be like, "Oh my God, I have the craziest idea," and you're like, "Oh man, now I got to try and put a mechanic to that."
Right. I mean, sometimes that happens. When you think of design, there's kind of two types of design. There's the top-down design and the bottom-up design. And top-down is kind of starting with a theme, starting with some idea, and then figuring out how to portray that in a game. And then the bottom-up design is starting with a mechanic, and then figuring out how to theme that mechanic. And I would say early on, it's always going to be a combination of the two, but early on we probably did a little more bottom-up design, especially because we were working with an established game. Like many of the cards that we published early on were from the original Netrunner that was released in the mid-1990s. And so we didn't have to do a whole lot to change them other than to theme them. So like we had the mechanic and we just had to figure out where that mechanic fit in the Android universe. But as time has gone on, I prefer to do a little bit more top-down design where it's like, well, let's think about what exists in this world and what we want to portray in the world, and then figure out how to match a mechanic to it. So that's something that's happened a lot more recently. And I think the Sansan cycle is kind of the first real attempt to do an entire cycle kind of starting at the top down. Lunar cycle was kind of marching in that direction, but the Sansan was the first one where we sat down and it's like, let's break out every pack. Let's figure out what's going in each pack, what should go in each pack, and then we'll kind of match card abilities to that.
And I don't think that's going unnoticed, because I do know when I open a pack of cards from this Sansan cycle, and it's like, okay, here's one theme of cards, and you're really putting them, variety in those packs with that theme. Like the genetics ones are all there out the gate. Maybe not all there, but like we don't know what's coming. But I mean, we have enough where you're actively using that mechanic. It's not like you teased it with like one card and then
right.
I've got to wait 3 packs and then another card's going to come. And each pack is themed now, right? In that sense.
Right. Yeah, each one kind of is themed around a specific district or location in Sansan. And I think that worked out really well. Like each one, you can kind of look at a card and almost like know what pack it came from, which you can't do for the other cycles. It's like, where did Woodcutter come from? Well, it's somewhere. I don't know where, but if then you look at something and it's like, well, where did Steady Guide come from? Well, that's probably Breaker Bay. That's a college theme pack. And so like having that sense of place makes those cards a little bit more memorable. And when you open and go through the pack, it kind of tells a little bit more of a narrative, even if, they aren't linked together narratively.
Is that something you're pushing from a design space? Like, is that you now trying to challenge yourself more in designing these cards because, like you said, we're pretty much ran the gauntlet for the original game,
Right.
right? So now
Yep.
everything that's coming out is, a
New.
fresh take on everything. So is this you saying, pushing yourself as a designer, and you're like, and you set this for yourself, like you showed up and said, I'm going to make these packs theme wise, I've gone out, I've read all those Android Netrunner books, I've got my source material now, and
Yeah,
I'm
I mean,
go.
I think the idea behind a little bit more of a top-down design kind of came while we were working on the lunar cycle. I was in the middle of the lunar cycle, and then we were getting toward the end. It's like, now we have to break these up, and it was like, it would have made a lot of sense to kind of figure out where these cards went before the end of the process. And I mean, before, we would like to break it up just to make sure like the power level of each pack is pretty consistent. You don't have like all of the best cards or the most exciting or flashy cards in one set, and you had a good variety of different card types and different factions in those packs. But it's like towards the end of it, it was like, man, I wish we had a little bit more of a theme for each one. So like you could actually feel like you're exploring the moon, because Nasir he's an explorer. I mean, he explores cyberspace, but I would like players to explore the moon with us as we are, in the middle of this cycle. So it's like, well, why don't we, if we do this again, but we kind of basically have it so that each pack is its own place, and then we kind of tie that into a greater kind of place. And it made sense to do one of the megapolises in the universe, and we chose Sansan to do that with. But yeah, it kind of came out of the lunar cycle and looking back and seeing what we could improve with the lunar cycle, and that kind of made us want to go and kind of explore a place from the ground up a little bit more.
I had a question. Lucas, you mentioned that the approach lately has been from a very top-down design, and of course, if you look at just at the core of the game, a lot of it is still these other mechanics that are part of it. The top-down design basically helps the thematic elements of the game kind of match and fit with fit into the mechanics of the game. So my question to you would be, looking at those two different things, like the mechanics and like how thematically the cards are crafted. If you could maybe, like, let's say 50-50, 60-40, how
Sure.
much of the game is sort of tailored towards the mechanics versus the thematic elements? And at which point do you decide as a developer that you kind of have to say, you know what, damn the thematics, we've got to just stick with what's necessary for the mechanics of the game?
Right. I mean, you can do as much thematic work as you want, but if the mechanics aren't there and aren't good for the game, like, it shouldn't go into a set, obviously. Like, you do have to make sure that the gameplay is primarily the thing that's going to be exciting about a card, more so than the art and the theme, which should also be exciting, but you want to make sure that the card pulls its weight at a mechanical level. So, I mean, the strategy behind that is we over-design. So, like, we'll get more cards than we need for a set, and then at the end we'll figure out what's not pulling its weight or what is too dangerous for the game, what we're not comfortable printing, and then we cut out those extra cards, and that's worked really well. So before, early on, I wouldn't really do that, and then you're kind of left trying, at the last part of playtesting, you're trying to really figure out how to solve some issue cards. And now we just get extra cards, we make extra cards, and then we decide what we don't want, and we remove those from the set or push them into the next set so that we can revisit them and have more time to actually make sure that they're pulling their mechanical weight.
Okay.
Do you think that the theme that you're building on now, excuse me, will we see that in other stories? I know, I mentioned that Fantasy Flight had some Android Netrunner books.
Right.
Is that something that have they been approached to keep going with the IP into?
We would definitely like to continue kind of expanding the IP and exploring different elements of it. Obviously, the IP is bigger than just Netrunner itself. We've had other games in the universe, and
Right.
it's very possible we might have more games in the universe in the future. And so books are definitely one way to do it, and I think there's definitely a good chance that you might see something in the future.
Do you know anything about what Leela Patel brings there? We had a question saying that we don't really know much about Leela, and
Right.
what we do sounds very interesting.
Right. I mean, she is definitely kind of a thrill seeker, I would say. I regret a little bit some of the flavor text on Leela, I think it sells her character short a bit. I mean, you first see her introduced in the satellite uplink where she's basically hacking from space, and it's like that's just ridiculous. It's like why are you in space? But you're in space because, well, nobody expects you to be in space, and it sounds like a pretty kick-ass thing to do. They're like, oh, where's the signal coming from? Well, it obviously can't be, hacked from remotely. It can't be hacked remotely, so it's totally safe. But she's like, nope, it's not safe because I'm doing what you don't expect. So I think her subtitle of I believe it's Trained Pragmatist is. It doesn't really tell you much about her character, but like she's definitely into like extreme stunts, sports, anything like that. Like she can kick some ass in meat space and in cyberspace.
Nice. It's really exciting to hear that you guys are, that the possibility is on the table to expand the universe, because I think a lot of people have really drank up what you've put out there, from the original game, had its big cult following. We had, what was it called? Man, I'm totally blanking on the Donald Vaccarino one.
Oh, yeah, Infiltration.
Just goes to show I remember the designer, though.
Right. Yeah, exactly. That's the important part right there. Gotta remember who made the game.
Talking about, still touching with the original Netrunner, you did some adjustments with the Psy game and the tracing elements of it, and taking a lot of the so-called randomness out of it with the dice and things like that. We see another online card game really getting popular now with Hearthstone. And it doesn't seem like people have a problem with the randomness in Hearthstone, and that's achieving like a level of competitiveness and growing in the esports community. Does that make you think that you could explore that again, or bring back the dice roll, or bring back something else, or are you kind of like, I took it out for a reason, damn it, and I don't want it back in? Or are you just going to say, I will never close the door on those options?
I mean, you never really want to close the door, but I'm going to close the door on dice. Like, dice don't belong in card games, in my opinion. At least card games where, you have a very competitive environment and you want to reward skill. And it's not even so much the fact that it adds extra randomness, because there are other ways to add randomness to the game. But once you start having that second level of randomness, because you already have randomness when you're shuffling your deck, and once you add that second step, it just seems like so in your face that a lot of players just get turned off by it, because it's very obvious when you flub a roll and you lose the game because you flubbed the roll. It's not very obvious when you shuffle your deck and you lose the game because you shuffled your deck. But that also happens, and that's something that card gamers accept, but they don't want to accept, and I don't want to accept losing just because I rolled a 1 5 times in a row. Like, that's not fun. Like, I'll play Risk if I want to play something like that. And I don't want to play Netrunner. I mean, Hearthstone is an awesome game, and I really enjoy playing it. But I think one reason you can have all those random effects in Hearthstone is, like, you're playing for very short periods of time. Like, you can finish a game in, like, 10 minutes for the most part, while Netrunner is slightly longer. Like, it can go 10 minutes, but it could also go 20, 30, or 40 minutes. And you don't want a 40-minute game decided by that level of randomness.
Yeah, I think that's the point that I was going to go to at the end there, is that, the longer the game, the more people are wanting something based on skill. Like, you don't want to spend 3 hours and all of a sudden it comes down to a rock, paper, scissors match at the end.
Right.
Yeah. But then, like you say, Hearthstone, like a 15-minute, I'm going to jump on and kill some time. You know what, if I, don't roll so-and-so on this, does it really matter? No, you just queue up another game.
Right, exactly. And when you have those short, matches, you can play best of 3, best of 5, and it'll hopefully the luck will even out a little bit more over the course of the game. With Netrunner, you play 2 games, but you have to switch sides, and so it's not quite the same experience as far as the tournament play.
Hollis, did you have one?
Well, it piggybacks off that question, and I think this is where my questions become the dark questions that everyone was scared I would ask. So. No, so we talked about, of course, you just talked about sort of like the random chance, not having dice available in the game, because it takes an element out of the game where, for a card game, shuffling your deck, like you said, though has variance, the variance set is more acceptable because by nature it's a card game.
Right.
So then, of course, that fast forwards me to the inclusion of the mechanic of side games, and of course, specifically, we're talking about like the card that is Caprice Nisei. So my question would be, and granted, I will say this. Let me preface this. I always give the real talk. So I definitely think there's board states with using Caprice Nisei where you can kind of read, and you can make, based on the information available, a better estimated guess of what should be bet with a Caprice side bet. My question is, during the development process and, the development of Psy and looking at a card like Caprice, is the Psy game concept something that generally, in development-wise, you tend to stay more away from? Or is, in the development of the Psy game, especially with Caprice, in regards to Caprice Nisei, was this not an issue? Basically, it's pretty much the question.
Right.
Like, was it not as impactful? As I'm sure you're aware, you have tournaments there in Minnesota, and you're aware of the competitive scene. Jinteki decks using Caprice Nisei is not a new thing. It's been there for a while, and it is very effective. So, really, what has the what have you noticed basically from the side games being included in the game? Positive, negative, any feedback you would give now after the fact?
Yeah, I mean, Caprice, the Sky is Falling, you say, is obviously a very controversial card, and I don't regret printing her. I think she's a good card, and she serves her function in the game. Side games are seen as random by some players, but I don't think they're random. If you're playing randomly, you're playing them wrong, because there is an actual economic cost to playing a side game randomly. If I know that you're playing randomly, I'm just going to bid 0 because that is the safest bet and it gives me an advantage by bidding 0. And so just because you're playing kind of a game of rock paper scissors, it's not the same as a game of rock paper scissors because there's a cost to throwing rock or a cost to throwing paper and maybe no cost to throwing scissors, and so that changes the the payout matrix that you're getting from playing the game. And since so many times a game can come down to your 1 or 2 credits short of breaking into a server or advancing an agenda, like you can't just write that cost off as negligible. So I don't think Psy is as random as some people think that it is, or think that it turns out to be. And I also think that high impact Psy cards are important because it helps define Jinteki as a faction. Jinteki doesn't really trace, like they don't trace. Instead, they do Psy. And so sure, they have Shinobi, which is like their, one of their few trace cards. I think it's their only one right now. But Psy is kind of their...
The snowflake, the ever-powerful snowflake.
The snowflake, yeah. Snowflake, don't see that played a lot, but I think it's not bad to have a powerful Psy card that helps define Psy within their faction, because it would be a real shame if that's one of their strengths and part of their color pie and you never see it played. So I think it's good that you have impactful Psy cards. One of the things that Caprice does as well is it allows you to potentially extend a scoring window or create an end game state where the runner cannot just rely on having the biggest rig and the most credits in order to break into a server, which I think is also important because it ups the tension. Sometimes if you're playing those late game runner decks, like you're building a big shaper rig, like at a certain point it's almost mathematically impossible for the corp to win unless you have things like Caprice that can change the board state and can keep somebody out. Is it frustrating to lose a side game like 3 times in a row? Like, yeah, that's frustrating. But I don't think it's random to lose those side games, and you can also try to read your opponent and try to figure out their patterns and what they're going to play. So I don't regret printing Caprice, and I'm sure there's going to be a big hullabaloo in the 4th pack when another side card comes out that is almost as good as Caprice. I won't say it's as good as Caprice, but it's almost as good as Caprice.
Oh,
so
yeah,
the sky will fall again.
Exclusives.
Oh,
Loving it.
Thank you so much for that answer. That was a brave answer. Thank you so much.
4th pack, Sky Falling. You heard it here first.
That's right.
Tagging on to that, do you how careful are you with overusing a mechanic? Like, you guys come up with something, say like Psy game, and you're like, oh man, this is so cool, and then it's on, or you guys want to put it on like 15 or 20 cards, and you're like, whoa, like we got to slow this down. And or are
Right.
you, or does it just happen naturally where you're like, this is a crazy mechanic, I'll put it here, one card, introduce it slowly, see how it catches on.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's going to change a little bit. Obviously, now that we've announced rotation, like cards do have a specific lifespan within the pool. It's a pretty long lifespan, but it is still a set lifespan. And so you can't wait forever for a card to become viable or for a card to pick up some more support to become viable. So we definitely, try to not give you everything at once for like a new strategy or a new build. We like to kind of, make people go back and look at the card pool and find cards that they might have overlooked the first time, or if we maybe undercosted a card the first time, maybe we look and we see like, well, is there any way that we can create new synergies with this card to increase the value because it was a little bit lower than we anticipated. And so I think we've done a pretty good job of not throwing everything at you at once. Like currents came out and we've kind of done a steady drip, or you will see a steady drip of those kind of moving forward, but we didn't give you a ton of options, and we kind of wanted to see how they affected things. And everybody's like, well, the runner currents are underpowered, and it's like, well, they're supposed to be underpowered because they're kind of there to check the corp ones, which are supposed to be the stronger ones. And I think you'll see us to be a little bit more aggressive with things like runner currents moving forward, just because it creates, a change in the environment and it changes the way that people look at cards and value cards. But I don't think we come up with something new and just want to spit it out over and over again, because then it does lose its uniqueness and it's not as interesting. Like the Wayland agendas and the Sansan cycle are, I wasn't even sure if I wanted to do like a 3-1 and a 4-2 and a 5-3 as far as the face-up agendas went. But it's like, this is a cool mechanic, and I think because it's telling the narrative that Wayland is rebuilding Sansan, that it's a good one to have, and it's a good one to do in the cycle 3 times.
That's pretty crazy. When the last question I have about the old style of card game and the conversion to the new is, you did a talk on game design, and it kind of got put around in the forums and things like that, and in there you mentioned that you had a lot more corporations than what you cut down to, and you said that Blue Sun was supposed to be a different corp ID,
Right.
or not ID, like its own
Faction.
faction. Argus Security was going to be a faction, and I really love that flavor in the game about how different things tie in. And even you see Leela on the side, like Uplink, you said, Oracle Maze, on the Sure Gamble and things like that. Can you give us? Is there any other cards that were going to be standouts like Blue Sun and Argus that got rolled under that Wayland consortium kind of thing, or runner factions that just got dropped off?
Right. I mean, we did initially have more corps in the game and more runners in the game, and as far as the runner factions go, 3 just felt right, because I mean, there's 3 types of ice in the game for the most part. There's more, but there's 3 main types of ice in the game, so it made sense to kind of have each one specialize with one type of ice. And once you got to a 4th one, it just got kind of weird. And on the corp side of things, I think it was important to have a little bit more thematic diversity, because you can't just have a corp that does barriers, and you can't just have a corp that does code gates, and you can't just have a corp that does sentries and call it a day, because then that makes it a little bit too much rock paper scissors as far as matchups, where if I'm playing the runner that's good at code gate breakers, decoders, and you're playing the corp that's good at code gates, like that becomes less interesting. So while the various corp factions do have kind of their ice that they're strongest at, it didn't make sense to kind of put them into 3 boxes, just like the runners were put into 3 boxes. And we also needed Jinteki in the game. We needed Haas Bayreuth in the game. We needed NBN in the game, because it's a game about hacking, so you need an information company. And so and then it's like, well, Wayland built the Beanstalk, like you can't leave them out. And it was also, as you say, it was also the way to fit all of these other corporations that we wanted to fit in the game and we couldn't into the game, because they own all of these sub corporations and have tons of kind of feeder organizations that play into them.
Cool. Hollis, you got follow-ups there?
Oh man, I have so many follow-ups, but
Because
I
I
don't
can
want to
keep
be.
going with the list.
I don't want to be selfish. I'm gonna ask a question that someone asked. I'm gonna choose one at random that I've been keeping here. I got a big list. So let's see. Okay, so a question that I actually do like immediately because I like I like the controversy. So
Oh yeah, definitely.
so trying to ask the questions that everyone is knows will get me banned from the Netrunner community. A a very skilled player from Australia wrote an article, and his name is Jesse Marshall. He actually is a world's top 8 competitor. And I don't actually. Let me start off with that. Lucas, how often do you read the social content? Like how often do you watch? Like for example, how often do you watch A&R Bad Pub? Every day, right? Every day.
Oh yeah, all the time. I actually, I'll read some articles and browse some forums and stuff. I don't really listen to a lot of podcasts or shows or anything like that. It's hard for me to kind of multitask at work, and that's when a lot of people kind of like to do that sort of thing, like put it on in the background. But I just find like I can't focus on that and something else because it's so interesting. Like the content is too interesting. Like I got to listen to it or I got to be working. So I choose to be working instead. But I like to browse forums, read some articles, and kind of keep up on the pulse of the community a little bit that way.
To everyone in the Netrunner community, that means it's very possible Lucas has seen everything you've ever typed. So
It's
just keep
possible.
that in mind when you are writing it, that he has probably read it or listened to it or what have you. But specifically, the article that I'm talking about was actually titled "What's Wrong with Wayland?" And I know for a while it caused like, if you're familiar with like Reddit Netrunner gigs, it caused
Yep.
like a lot of diverse opinions in regards to where Wayland is as a faction. So it's a multi-part question to you. So I don't know if you've seen that article. Have you seen that article?
I have seen the article. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So my multi-part question is one, what's your opinion on the current state of Wayland? And two, I mean, the article raised some good points in regards to their econ and their ice that they have available to them. More specifically, I think it's code gates and the alternate scoring like options for them. So, sorry, one, what's your opinion on where Wayland is? Two, where do you see are the places to really improve Wayland as a faction, considering that competitively it's actually pretty underrepresented?
Right. Well, I mean, I think the big thing with Wayland is like they have one 3.2 agenda that's Project Atlas that you can use effectively. And I think that's probably, if you want to look at weaknesses, their biggest weakness. It's not their ICE, it's not their econ, it's the fact that they have Project Atlas. And after that, you're really scrapping to look for agendas that you can score quickly and easily and get something back from. So I would say their agendas are probably weaker than their ICE or econ. I think their econ is actually pretty good. I mean, you have to run potentially Operation Econ, but you can definitely make a lot of money with Wayland. And they have other ways to make money off of their ICE, like their ICE will give them money when the runner goes into it. I think Wayland right now is a little bit top heavy because you have Blue Sun and that's a very competitive ID, and then after that people are kind of figuring out like, well, is Gagarin good? Is Titan Transnational good? Maybe that was good for a while, then Clot came out and kind of killed the fast advance out of Titan. But I think Wayland is always going to be competitive just because they have Scorched Earth in faction. Like that's something you have to respect as the runner. A lot of people run Plascreator. I've had worse, but if you score a cleaner, it's like that's not necessarily going to save you from a double or triple Scorched Earth. And I think moving forward, you'll kind of see a Wayland slightly refocus on meat damage and actually going out and killing the runner a little bit more than trying to like score out agendas, because they are a little bit more aggressive than the other corporations. And that threat should be a real threat that people have to respect every time they see Wayland across the table from them.
Agreed. Nice. Nice.
When
Thank
when you read something like that, like some of the comments and concerns, how much do you guys take that into account? Or like was people complaining about the AstroScript stuff? Oh, there's got to be a fix for it. There's got to be a fix for it. Then do you directly turn around and make Clot? Or
Clot is definitely, a response to the prevalence of fast advance in the meta. Obviously, it took a while for it to come out, and it took a while for us to decide that we wanted to print a harder counter to fast advance than the source that came out in Creation and Control, since that was probably a little bit too expensive with the influence cost for most people to want to put into their decks. and you do have some Shikana as well that you could play now. But yeah, I mean, we try to keep pulse on the competitive environment. Obviously, any answer directly to the competitive environment is risky because by the time it comes out, like the environment will shift and it might not even be a problem, and or you might create a new problem if you try to answer it. But fast advance is something that is incredibly prevalent in the game, and the game is built on the capability of fast advancing. Like, it has to be there. And so it felt like, well, this is a universal enough strategy that we should probably have some ways for runners to counter it if they want to do so. And that's kind of where Clot came from.
Yeah, I think that's a great answer. So you guys are really trying to keep up on what the meta is doing and design towards, like, a little bit.
A little bit.
So
I mean, you don't want to create cards that just reinforce the current meta, and obviously you don't exactly know where the current meta will be because you're working so far in the future, but you don't want to design cards that will kind of at least stagnate or push the meta back to whatever the current meta is. So like when Andromeda is popular, you don't necessarily want to go out and be like, oh, let's make a lot of cards to make Andromeda more powerful because maybe in another year she won't be popular. It's like, no, that's bad idea. You should probably look at making like Ken Tenma more popular or Ian Sterling more popular or something like that and give them more support because they're not currently being played. And again, that might change, but it won't necessarily change unless you create those sort of cards and kind of give players a reason to relook at some identities that they might not want to look at again. And I think there are a lot of competitive identities, especially on the runner side, that you could win a tournament with. But whenever you have an established identity that wins and people know how to play it, because player skill is so important in the game, you'll probably default to playing the one that you're most comfortable playing and the one that you've won the most with up to that point.
So are you allowed to say if there's been a surprise? Like, is there a card or an ID that you created and you printed it off and you're like, I can't believe we printed this. This is going to be so powerful. And then everyone looked at it when it came out and was like, oh, yeah, look at this. And then I'm still going to play RP and Andy.
Right. That's a good question.
Or something you feel is very underrated, or like, you know, just this combo that you really thought was going to happen, or...
I mean, there's been some of that. I try not to, you know, get too attached to something. You know, you try. I guess I am surprised a little bit that I was surprised a little bit that Andromeda was as popular as she was. Like, I knew she was good, but I did not think that she was better necessarily than Gabe, and I don't think she's better than Gabe in certain matchups. But you know, the consistency that she gives you is pretty unparalleled, starting with those 9 cards in hand. So that took me a little bit by surprise. Like, we try to balance out, you know, a powerful ability with link or lack of link, and so on and so forth. And so, you know, having a link on top of that was probably just like the icing on the cake, and maybe shouldn't have happened. I thought Kit would be better, I guess I'd say. Like, her ability is so strong, especially if you have the right icebreakers in play. Cyber Cypher or even Steady Guide now, you know, can be a good build with her. And, you know, Paintbrush got nerfed a little bit too hard, I think, because we were relying on Kit being a little bit more powerful than she ended up being. Like, I wish Paintbrush was a little bit better, but it, you know, working only on res pieces of ice and costing 2 MU was just a little bit too much. And that nerf also nerfed Kit. And I do wish that it was slightly more competitive.
Is there an opposite to that? Something that you know, something that's really powerful right now that you guys didn't expect was...
Well, I mean, it's hard to know what's really powerful right now. Like, the meta seems to be in a state of flux with a lot of cards flying around everywhere and a lot of different IDs winning. I guess, man, that's a tough question. I mean, there's a lot of good cards out there right now. I guess there's really nothing that kind of pops into mind is like, I can't believe this card is considered to be powerful. Like, nothing super surprising, but that might just be because I accept things as they are, and I don't remember what I thought of them before.
Speaking into, you know, the in-house development of cards that may or may not be too powerful or weaker than you expected, for example, so when I look at what's coming up here, like is it Chrome City? Chrome City comes out very soon.
Yep.
So I guess my question is, Chrome City comes out I think at the end of this month. From the time that Chrome City is released to the last time you guys got to make any changes before that pack is cut and printed and ready to be delivered, how much time is it in between? 6 months? 1 year?
Or are you saying like how far ahead in the cycle are they of design?
Right. So I mean, what was the last time
It depends. I mean, it fluctuates depending on the set. But I mean, we do lock in a set all at once. So like the first and the last pack will have a different time associated with it. So when you're in the middle of a cycle, it's closer to a year. When you're at the front end of a cycle, it's closer to, like the 6 to 8 month window as far as when that card was locked in. And that's something else to consider. Like sometimes you want to put there's a reason Claude is card number 1. Like we wanted to make a statement and shake up the meta and be like, okay, let's see what happens here. And let's put this in the first pack. Cause if it was on the 6th pack, like it still wouldn't have come out by now. It wouldn't be out for regionals. And you can't put too much, effort into figuring out exactly what month it's going to come out because you never know. Like there are always potential delays and it's not always in our control when a pack releases, but for the most part, you do want to think like, should this card come out in the first pack? Should it come out in the last pack? If this is an important meta card or a card that we think, is good to shake up the competitive environment, then we will move it up to the first or second pack to try to get it out sooner rather than later. And so that means it could come out, about 6-7 months after we lock the card in. But usually it's a little bit closer to 10 months to a year for the most part.
Okay.
So in when you guys are talking about moving cards from pack to pack and things like that, I look at that as kind of a little bit of balancing things out. What is the hardest thing to balance with this game for you from a design perspective? Is it a typical like mechanic? Is it like say for example, is setting the base trace strength the hardest thing to do, or is it playing with the influence, for example?
Well, I guess I'd say the hardest thing to balance are our identities, and I think that's one area where we're getting better at and we'll continue to get better at, but we haven't necessarily done as good of a job as we could have in the past. Like there are a lot of identities that you look at and you're like, and card support isn't there for that identity right now, so it probably could have been a little bit stronger or could have had more influence. And so I would say trying to find the sweet spot where, an identity is good and playable, but you don't create a monster is the hardest thing to do, because you want the identities to be exciting, like they're signature cards in the pack, but on the other hand, you don't want to destroy all the other identities that are in that faction by releasing it. And so trying to find that spot where it's good and it's playable and it creates maybe a new sort of build is what you want. But many times we erred on the side of like, well, let's not make this too good. Like Kit, for example, like we should really lower that influence. And I don't think that was necessarily the wrong call, but like her support cards didn't end up there. And so in that regard, like she probably could have had the influence bump back up. Or Ian Sterling, for example, is really close and really good and can totally win games if you're playing a glacier heavy meta. Like those 2 credits are going to do some massive work, and if you're winning, then you don't even need the 2 credits. But I think identities are definitely the hardest part to find the sweet spot on as far as balance and playability and also excitement, because you want people to be excited about getting an identity and try and get out on playing it. But not every identity will be a competitive identity that will win or be able to win worlds, and that's just how it is. But we do want to make sure that the identities are exciting, and that even if you're not going to go to a tournament, that there's a reason to play the identity and a reason to kind of bring it out and show it to your friends and be like, look what I did with it. This is really cool. I put this deck together, and have enough support that it feels like you have a real chance of taking home the bacon.
I think sorry, I just want to continue this line for a second. I just want to continue down with a little bit of a statement and a wrap up there. And I think you guys do an amazing job of keeping the game audience very broad. You have a lot of people that pick up the core set and might pick up a certain pack because it has a certain card in it, or maybe a deluxe box because they're a fan of Shaper, and they just play casual. Very
Right.
Then you have the competitive scene where we want it's people trying to find the best combination of 45 cards to build that runner deck, and it's such a broad audience with this game, and I think you guys do a very good job. And I do think that there are going to be cards in there that don't make it competitive, that are options for the casual play. It was a great quote that you told me when we were talking about Monolith, at Worlds last year, and you said my job as a designer is to give people options.
Right.
Right, and I think that's what you guys do with these sets. You're not just trying to make a pack of 20 of the best cards.
Yes.
Here at Bad Publicity and stuff, Hollis and I we have crazy discussions on cards that some people haven't even thought about putting into decks because the top tier players haven't come up with that deck yet, and it's not popular. But I think those cards are the fun ones to play with when you want to show up at a league night and take someone off their game once in a while.
Right. I mean, it's impossible to make every card pull its own weight in a competitive environment, because competitive environments are all about exploiting cards and finding the most efficient options. And some cards are just going to be more efficient based on all of the other cards that exist at any given time. Not everything is going to be playable. That said, we don't set out to design bad cards that nobody's going to play, because that just doesn't make sense. You want each card to do something and to go into somebody's deck. And so there's a couple cards that maybe go into nobody's deck, and I regret not bumping the power level of those cards a little bit. But I mean, you definitely do want to give players options, and to you don't always want to give them the obvious answer. Sometimes it's more exciting when you find a card that nobody's playing and you are able to play it. That's part of the self-expression of card games, is when you build a deck that nobody else is building, and then you take it to a tournament or a game night and you start winning with it. There's almost nothing that's more satisfying than that as far as tabletop gaming goes. That is the experience that I want players to have.
Is there something that's still undiscovered that is incredibly powerful out there?
Oh, probably, but I mean, I wouldn't know what it is. I mean, when it comes down to it, the top level competitive players, they have a much better read on the current meta, I think, than I do. They play in it way more, and it's pretty impressive the amount of hours that they'll put into refining their decks. So I'm sure there's some undiscovered gems out there. There's a couple cards I like to play, but is it going to make a splash at Worlds? Well, it'll take a good player and a good pilot to do that. So I imagine we'll continue to see a lot of diversity in the meta just moving forward, since we've seen it lately. But I imagine there are still some diamonds in the rough to be discovered. I mean, I was still gonna throw out Starlight Crusade funding there. It's time. Maybe it hasn't come yet, but someday somebody's going to build a kick-ass doubles deck and actually figure out how to make that thing work, because the pieces, I'm not going to say they're there. I think they're really damn close, though. I mean, game day, man, that pushes it over the edge, in my opinion. But that's up to the players to figure out, I guess, at this point.
Well, I mean, I think there's a lot of people out here that, you probably will see a flood tomorrow of deck lists with that in, taking up your challenge now.
That's right.
Pretty much. Something basically what you just said actually leads into two questions for people in the chat. Let me just run those by you real quick. Someone asked, how do you decide if an ID should get link or not? And is it mostly thematic, or is it just kind of like a power bump you add to the ID?
Yeah, I mean, in some cases it's thematic because, link can represent a variety of things. It can represent kind of your connection to the net and how strong it is, how many backdoors you have, how well connected you are within the hacking community. So it can represent all of those things, and sometimes it doesn't make sense for somebody to have zero link thematically, and then we try to adjust the rest of their kit around it. But for the most part, I would say it comes down to just another balancing factor, where if we think that the ability is slightly weaker than other abilities, we like to compensate by putting that link on there. So
Nice.
it's a little bit of both, but I'd say primarily it comes down to, do we think this card needs the link, or can it operate fine without the link, at which point we would prefer to leave it off if we can.
Okay. And are there any internal, like in the internal FFG meta, are there any decks that basically were amazing that you've not seen the community, I guess, put in the forefront as much as internally at FFG?
Well, I mean, I guess I mean there's different metas. Like there's the playtest meta and then the non-playtest meta. And the non-playtest meta at FFG, like everybody's pretty cool, and they like to build crazy decks. Like there aren't a ton of like spikes or power gamers that are just going to try to crush you and win. Like everybody kind of likes to try out different stuff and just have fun with the game. So I wouldn't say we're like top tier competitive. But you'll see some Ian Sterling decks and Kit decks and Wizard decks, and Noise is still pretty popular. You'll see stuff like that around, but you won't see a lot of like NVN Fast Advance or Andromeda or Andy Stealth or stuff like that. People just kind of like to build their own thing and just have fun with the game, which makes sense. Like it's kind of an escape a little bit, and you don't want to be too competitive with something that you can't actually have a competitive outlet for. Like we can't win prizes and enter tournaments kind of in the same way that everybody else can. So it's nice to explore a lighter side of the game.
So how happy are you in the competitive side of the game that we haven't had to utilize a banned or restricted list yet?
Right. I think that makes me pretty happy. Obviously, a banned and a restricted list, when you have those things, it definitely increases the barrier of entry for new players because it's just something else to remember. Or if you buy some cards and then you go to a tournament or you start playing with your friends and they're like, your deck is legal. You're like, what do you mean? I have 20 agenda points in here. What do you mean it's illegal? And they're like, well, you're using these cards that you're not allowed to use together. Like that's kind of a feel bad moment. And the longer we can keep that sort of thing out of the game, I think the better. I do think we have come close to getting a restricted list or something like that in the past, but the game has been able to bounce back and the meta has been able to bounce back, and the players have kind of adapted to what's out there, I think, in a really good way. So hopefully we'll see a little more creativity like that moving forward. And I mean, honestly, I think the meta has never been in a more diverse or stronger place than it is right now.
I agree. I totally agree.
You just say that you guys at Fantasy Flight aren't allowed to win the prizes and play in the big tournaments, but are you able to play this game and enjoy it like we do? And
yeah, I mean, I still enjoy the game. It's fun. I play it maybe for some different reasons than I played some games in the past when I looked at them as a competitive endeavor. But playtesting is kind of the competitive outlet where you just see kind of how far you can push cards and how broken you can make a deck, and then you dial it back from there. But just throwing down with a regular, it's really exciting because like in a way, like I've never played in the meta that currently exists before, because again we do test all of the cards together in a cycle, and so like I've never played in the meta where we only have the Valley and Breaker Bay. Like that is new. I have not played in that meta, and it's interesting to kind of see how it works without the rest of the cards in the cycle. So it's always exciting just to see what's happening, and we kind of make a guess, but when it comes down to it, we just kind of accept like there's going to be fluctuations that we can't control and we can't predict, and hopefully everything works out in the end. There's definitely a little bit of luck involved in making sure like things stay balanced throughout the course of a cycle.
So what factions do you keep in your deck box then when you're ready to just go play a fun game?
I like to keep a variety of factions. I guess recently it's been more Jinteki, NVN, and Anarch. I think the Anarch ID pool is the deepest out of probably every faction in the game. It's a lot of fun to throw down a Quetzal or Noise or even a Wizard, with all of the asset economy out there.
And you never just like put on like a black hat and some sunglasses and go like,
Guy
couple towns
Incognito
over.
is registering here for the tournaments,
and just come in and Bobby Fischer the whole situation one time.
Man, I mean I do sometimes wonder, how I would perform at a tournament. I don't honestly think I would win. I don't play in the current environment enough to probably beat a top tier player at this game, but if they want to come into the future meta and challenge, that'd be a different story.
All those time travelers, then they can be on your level. Hollis, over to you.
No, thank you so much for saying that, because it's like, man, this is amazing. He's setting me up for every question. No, like, so, you say that you, of course, you don't get the luxury of participating in any of the tournaments for a game that you created. So, as you no doubt have seen, because I'm sure you've been aware of this, they're doing a lot of, the community has decided to support the community. You're seeing a lot of these tournaments spring up where the goal is to try to get the person of like the specific invitational a winner, a trip to Worlds. Right now it's called the A&R Pro Circuit, and it's all over the U.S. I know there's people overseas that are also adopting a similar system. What's your feeling towards something like the A&R Pro Circuit, where the fans are willing to support themselves, to support the community? I will say, bringing the controversy back into things, some of this sparked, of course, from details regarding FFG prize support. You may not be able to touch on that, but how do you feel like the two compare? Is there any potential support, additional support that you can give us, that may be coming from FFG? So you're feeling on A&R Pro Circuit, FFG support for fan tournaments. There you go.
Right. That's a really good question. I don't feel qualified really to speak on the prize support side of things. That's basically organized play job, and I wouldn't want to say anything that they disagree with. I know they work really hard and they do the best that they can to give players prizes that they want and prizes that excite them. And I think we've begun to make strides, and alt art cards are pretty exciting, and we've begun to really think about what's going to be I guess viable and exciting to get at that point in the meta, so that you don't get a card 10 copies of the card and you're like, oh, I'll never play this card. So we want to give you cards that you'll play, but I think it's pretty awesome to see the community kind of band together and decide we want a little more competitive. We want more competitive outlets for the game, and we're going to kind of put it together and see what happens. I think that's probably a positive for the game, and it shows the passion that people have for the game. And so I think that's really cool. As far as FFG support for that sort of thing, again, I don't feel qualified to speak on that, but it's definitely something that I'm sure we'll watch closely and be interested to see where it goes.
Another question that we see pop up that, just to get this one out the way, that you probably won't be able to answer, is the question of big boxes come up a lot, like the deluxe expansions. Everybody wants to know what the next one is. NBN and what?
Well, we're assuming that there's a next one. I mean, it's a pretty safe assumption at this point, I'd say. We do have one faction that's just kind of sitting out there all alone.
Yeah, are they just going to get the biggest box altogether?
The biggest box ever. I mean, yeah, all NBA all the time. No, I mean, I think we have some pretty interesting things in store for that box, and in the near future, I think you'll actually be hearing some more information about it from FFG. Since we are moving towards the end of the Sand cycle, and I imagine we'll be releasing some information about it pretty soon. But until that happens, my lips are sealed.
My heart is broken. I was hoping to hear it.
If there is another big box, I would say it would be probably the best big box that we've ever done. It just kind of makes sense for it to be that way.
Always the latest release is the best release to date, right?
Oh yes, for sure. I mean, onward and upward.
I'm getting word actually from someone who just sent me a message here.
Breaking news coming in.
Breaking news, Lucas. Apparently, you are expected to be at some A&R Pro Circuit tournament, and it was very much asked if you would participate, considering that it's not sponsored via FFG. Apparently, the community wants you to lose or win really, really badly. One of them.
One of those two. I might be able to pull off one of those two things.
Cool.
Yeah, I could probably lose. I think that wouldn't be too hard. I'll just be playing Burk Bugs and my Whaled deck times 3.
Oh, God.
Everybody loves Burk Bugs, right? No, they won't see it coming.
Can we not? Can we not? That one still stings.
Yeah.
That's still.
Hey, Burk Bugs recently got a boost. The latest FAQ, it clarifies that you have to trash an installed program. So you might want to take a second look at that card.
We'll revise, make a note, Hollis. Next deck building episode. Speaking of the FAQs, how often do you guys like pump those out? Are we due for another one soon, or?
I mean, we kind of do them, I guess, a couple times a year.
Like, is it standard times, or do you guys feel like you just put them out when?
Oh, I mean, you definitely want one before, like Nationals and Worlds. Like, those are important times to do them. And then either before store championships or before regionals. Like, sometimes if we think it's really important, especially if you have like a restricted list in play, like you're going to want to keep that up to date a little bit more quickly than something that doesn't have a restricted list. But I would say we try to do it a couple times a year, and it's not quite standardized. Like you never quite know when you're going to get one. Part of it plays into our schedule, and when we feel like there's enough stuff collected to make it worth a while to go in and spit out another one.
Right.
But usually you'll see them before store championships and or regionals, and then before nationals and worlds.
Hollis, you got something else there?
Oh man, I got things for days.
Right.
The chat was blowing up. Oh man, what's the best juiciest question that no one will ask? So how do you feel about the extent of spoilers being released?
Sure,
Against
like on
FFG's
a unofficial spoilers.
We'll go ahead and we'll just say the internet.
Sure.
Not officially released.
Does it play into the theme of Netrunner?
Right, the hacking kind of makes it seem less exciting when the pack actually comes out. Like, it would be great to like have 5 cards spoiled, and then the pack comes out that day, and everybody goes, I'm like, well, what's the other 15 cards in this pack? Like, what's going to happen? Like, that's exciting.
Right.
Like, otherwise, you're just always looking forward to new cards that haven't come out yet, rather than kind of enjoying the meta and the cards that you have. And so I think it can be dangerous to kind of always like play for the future or look forward to the future stuff and not kind of enjoy where the game is at currently. So I think spoilers definitely serve their purpose, but like I think the less spoilers, the better for the most part.
Yeah, I mean, it's a living card game, right? We're not hunting. You're not opening a pack and then you're surprised what's in there, right? Everyone will have the same cards, so don't let someone else take that fun away from you.
Right. Yeah, I mean, you can always kind of try to avoid spoilers, and it's obviously hard if you stay involved with different communities and browse the internet a lot. And I do get the argument that you kind of want to know from a competitive standpoint what's in a pack so that you can prepare for it, especially if it's coming out before a major tournament. But like, if everybody's in the same boat, like, it's going to be fair. And so if there's a lot of spoilers or very few spoilers, like it should be an interesting challenge kind of either way. And so you might as well probably go with the option that makes that pack a little bit more interesting and exciting, and rather than the one where you're like, well, whatever, who cares? What about this other card that's coming out in 6 months? Like that just seems like a way to always project forward and enjoy nothing that you currently have.
Hollis, back to you, man.
Oh, sure. So I have to ask, just because it has been a common topic, I would say, especially over like the past 2 weeks, judge program, you may or may not have any details about it. When is it coming? Can we expect it soon?
Right. I mean, we're working on it. I don't know the exact timing or when we'll have something to announce, but we are working on it, and we have made progress on it internally. And I would imagine you will see something sometime in the near future, but when that will be, like, I wouldn't want to guess. But it is in the works. It is still coming, and I think it will definitely be a net positive for the game to have some more established floor rules for people to look at.
As a aside off that, there's an interview now with Steve, and he's talking about the judge program, and he says about the same thing. He can't speak to anything that's coming yet, but he says something about the certification. So is that like an official exam? Like, and if so, are you writing that test? Are you coming up with 50 multiple choice Netrunner questions that a judge has to go through?
That's a good question. I am certainly not going to be coming up with multiple choice questions. I mean, homework and tests, that's a thing of the past. I've
We're all
moved
big
forward.
boys now.
Yeah, exactly. We're all adults here. But I do think it is important, to make sure that people are playing under the same rules and that you have people who are knowledgeable about the rule set, running tournaments and doing regionals and nationals and things of that sort. Like, you want to make sure that you have a consistent experience for everyone, no matter where they're playing, and that it's not only up to the whim of the TO. I mean, we do like to empower TOs to kind of, make the call that's right for their meta and their tournament, and that's good. But you do have to make sure that everybody is playing under the same rules, because that's fair.
There's speaking of rules and the call from the community for some house rules. There's been a lot of debate, and even in the chat here, there's a question about how would you rule the situation where somebody accidentally rearranged the top cards of their deck on an architect access, while triggering architect, stuff got rearranged. Like, is there? And
we're assuming that you can't just figure out the correct order that was in. Like, they just start shuffling, and now there's no way to verify the. I'm guessing.
I guess as soon as my architect triggers, I pick it up and I randomly shuffle them up real quick,
Oh.
and then I say,
right.
Or what a better scenario is, I guess, while they're picking them up, they haven't looked yet and they fall.
Right. Sure. I mean, I'm kind of the opinion that you do in that case. If they fall, it depends kind of on what's happened to the game at that point. Like, it has changed the game, but if nobody's actually seen those top 5 cards, it's really just like an extra randomization step, and so it really shouldn't affect things too much. Like, you're still going to have the same 5 cards to look at, and yes, it's in a slightly different order, which does change things, but as far as it could have been in that order to begin with. So in that case, I think it's a pretty easy call to just be like, well, just continue playing. In the case where it's like you might look at it, or maybe the runner knows what the top card is or has seen the top 3 cards, that would actually help reconstruct what the top 5 should have been. But say like you can't reconstruct it, the top 5 are completely screwed up. I don't think that should be necessarily a game loss. That seems a little bit extreme for a situation like that. But it definitely could be, depending on the situation. I think it would really depend on the level of the competitive event. Like, is this a store championship? Is this a regional? Is this a national? Is this worlds? Like, where are we in the tournament? But I think in general, like, it should be pretty easy to reconstruct the hand with Architect, or just to be like, well, it's a kind of a random shuffle. Like, if it wasn't intentional, obviously if things are intentional, like if you're trying to gain an advantage by intentionally skirting the rules or something like that, then that should definitely be a game loss, a warning, and maybe even removal from the tournament. But obviously you can't actually prove an intent whenever it comes to judging, so you just kind of have to leave it up to the TO to make the best call. But if I saw somebody like drop their cards with Architect, I'd just be like, just shuffle them up and draw those 5 cards, provided it doesn't actually affect the game state.
Cool. I think that's a fair enough answer.
How do you feel about, because this has also been a new thing, StemHack recently announced that they're going to be handling some sort of fan-made rules, and they will stem not only from the existing Netrunner rulebook, but I think they're also going to be trying to borrow from, rules that exist as far as how it handles changes to the board state on accident, things like that, missing triggers. What's your stance on fan-made rules for the game that aren't FFG specific, that would be used for, I guess, separate fan events? How do you feel about that?
I think that can be dangerous, because it can kind of fragment the community, and you'll have people who are more purists and will be like, well, we should wait for the official rules, or we should use the official rules, or prefer the official rules. Then you might have people who are like, well, I like our rules better, and so we shouldn't use the official rules. And that can just lead to, potential controversy, where I don't think floor rules should really generate that much controversy, and obviously not having them generate some controversy. But once we do have them, hopefully everybody gets on the same page. So I guess I would just urge caution, not to kind of jump ahead of the train too far. We are working on rules, and I would say, trust us this time, and see what happens when our floor rules drop.
Cool. Lukas, are you happy with the pace of the release of this game? Or, it seems like if a pack comes out every month, are they working you too hard?
I think the release is it's a good pace. I have no complaints about the release. I think you want to keep the game moving and evolving and changing, and about one pack a month seems to be about the right time for that. You know, we've been doing LCGs for a long time. Obviously, Cthulhu moved to a box model where you get a box, you know, a couple times a year, maybe twice a year or something like that. And that's just, you know, it's a different sort of game. It's a more casual game. It's not a tournament game to the same extent that like Netrunner or Game of Thrones is. And so I think you always want to continually release cards, you know, at a pace where things are going to change and you can't get too comfortable. And I think every month is about right. Like, you know, you have a couple weeks to play with cards before something else comes along.
Do you think, because you said you've seen it both ways, right? You play test the cycle altogether, and you know, then you obviously observe the slow drip of packs coming out. You know, if you had your choice, would you release the everything all together? Would you just release a big, like, here's the cycle deluxe expansion, boom?
I mean, it's definitely exciting for the first couple of weeks, but you know, then the problem becomes you're waiting a really, really long time before the next one drops, and you know, people can just kind of lose interest, or they might not like the decks that are kind of currently dominating the meta, and so then they're like, I gotta wait how long before new cards come in and shake this up? So I think it's a much safer and more interesting environment where you kind of have little shakeups every month rather than like one big one that is going to settle out over a month or two anyway. And I think it's healthier for the long run of the game to have it that way, because you know, there's always something new that you could try out, and that, you know, requires experimentation rather than all the experimentation happening over a very short time with a big release.
Hollis, you got something, or you want me to go again?
Oh, I got, man. We got so many people.
Just
Sorry,
prepared or not?
No. Oh God, now I have too many. Well, I had a specific question about Laramie Fisk.
Okay.
Right now, the design and support for Laramie Fisk, we've seen one card that's already been spoiled that seems like it would work really well with Laramie. The question is that I was asked was, is Laramie Fisk, in, you know, looking at cards designed after he was sort of voted in, is Laramie Fisk going to be considered a highly competitive ID or one that's more thematic and fun? So is it...
This ties in with a good one that I had written down here. So
good.
I'll let you line it up first.
Is it Andy Gabe level, or is it Ian Sterling silhouette level?
That's a good question. I mean, Fisk's ability is really interesting because it seems on the service level that it might be helping the corp because it gives them cards. Obviously, card draw is something that, you know, early on in the game's life, people are like, why would I want to draw cards? And then Jackson Howard came along. People are like, oh, that's why I want to draw cards. Okay, yeah, now I'm down with card draw. And so it's a difficult ability to kind of figure out because, you know, it's so situational based on kind of the state of the game. And we definitely have some support for Laramie coming out in the future, but I think it's going to take a really, really good player who, you know, is building a really disruptive sort of, maybe even like data dealer, extend the game, mill out the corp strategy to get Laramie to the top tier competition level of like an Andromeda or something like that. But I think he will be very fun to play, and he will definitely inspire some different sort of builds out of Criminal. But I don't see him having like a huge splash competitively the moment he comes out. But hopefully I'm wrong. Like, you know, I'm sure there's some other ways to use him that people are going to come up with, and he can only get better in the future. Like, it's going to be pretty interesting to see where he ends up. But I think originally when he drops, like, people will be a little bit skeptical of that ability just because it's like, wait, the corp draws cards? Like, why would I want to do that? And they'll have to kind of overcome their initial skepticism to see what he can really do.
Yeah, that ties into probably some of the stuff that I was going to touch on. You know, and maybe you were just like me, where you really hoping that the collective was going to win, and you get it, you know. So the question that I was going to say is, would you ever do something like that again, plugged in Chronos? To me, it's you know, I'm the kind of person that you know, so I'll do something like this, like Bad Publicity, and you know, you get you know, you put it on YouTube and you get like 25 people give it a thumbs up, and you know, you get that 2 people that give it thumbs down, and you're like, You don't care about the 20. You're just like,
Right.
why?
You just keep
What?
focusing on those two negatives. Like,
What the hell?
man, what were they thinking?
You know, so like,
Come on.
so you put two of your designs up for grabs there, and basically people, gravitated and said, this is the one we want, and now the other one is gone forever.
Right.
And like, I don't know if I could do something like that. So like, what was your thoughts there when you saw one of your designs, and I don't know how attached you were to it on either side, right? The Chronos and the plugged in, just gone,
Right. I mean, you have so many designs that you have to get rid of and you have to kill. So, like, seeing one or two other ones get killed wasn't a huge deal. Like, I had a little bit more attachment because you actually,
Those are your
have
kids, man. Those are your
yeah,
kids.
I know. You have the final art there, but like, it wasn't too bad. I did, all through the plugged in tour. I was like, I'm completely neutral. I don't really care which one wins, and that probably wasn't entirely true. Like, I did have a preference as which one I would personally rather play, but like, I think they're both interesting designs, and they both did interesting things to the game, both Fisk and the collective, and then obviously the two Chronos protocol IDs. So like personally, I would have preferred to make a certain deck over another deck just because of my playstyle, but I think both of them are exciting, and I didn't really care which one came out on top for the most part.
Hollis, back to you, man. You got one there? Oh, did your mic go?
Hollis, calling Hollis, Earth to Hollis.
No.
Oh no!
Uh-oh.
Oh no!
All right,
So we're gonna get him back in here.
I'll pass the time here. We want to talk about draft. How have you appreciated the take on draft format? Is that something like, are you like, because it doesn't seem like it's really been pushed like the other Netrunner has. Do you feel if there was like chasing alt art cards or something in the draft packs, would that help, or is it like, because it's a really great game to draft? Like,
draft is fun. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there's other things we could potentially do that might add perceived value to the draft, but like, ultimately, like, we want to just give people who want that sort of experience the opportunity to have that sort of experience. And if you throw in something like, alt art cards, all of a sudden you're beginning to get a little bit CCG-ish, a little bit chasey, and it almost feels like a required purchase if you want to like pimp out your deck and stuff. And so I think it can be dangerous to add too much value to something, or perceived value to something if the way we make draft packs are like, we randomly put cards in based on different algorithms and stuff. And so like, if you start throwing in random cards that people really want, like, that's not what the LCG model is about. And so I do understand, the feeling that draft is expensive, and you have to play both sides in Netrunner. Like, you don't have to. There's the half draft, but most people want to play both sides in Netrunner as far as drafting a corp deck and drafting a runner deck. And so that is definitely a little bit pricey. It's not as cheap as other draft experiences that you might get, but I do think draft, gives people another way to kind of play the game, and you can definitely keep your draft cards. And if you're pooling together with some other people, you could even reshuffle them. It won't be exactly the same as it was coming out of the packs, but you could even redraft out of them, or kind of start creating your own cube from those cards. So I think it's a really good way to just kind of see crazy stuff that you don't normally see. And the thing I love about draft is that it's kind of as close as you can get to the original Netrunner as possible, because you can put all the agendas that you want together. Like, I can run the Nisei Mark II and the Astro Script and the Atlas all on the same deck, and the runner isn't going to know what hit him. Or all of a sudden I had a breaking news on the table and I scorched you. And that sort of experience is really fun when you just put cards together, or you get like 10 copies of Sure Gamble and you put that in your deck and you see how it runs, because that's so similar to how the old game originally played. Right. And so I think,
the purist
there, right? Exactly. I think you'll see a little bit more competitive support for draft. I believe we're running something at Worlds for draft, but I think overall, like, draft is a really fun experience, and it is an experience more so than like something that you're supposed to participate in. Like, it's an option for players, but we don't want it to feel required in any way.
I think Draft at Worlds is one of the best places to actually experience it. Um, I think it's really awesome when the packs are coming out right then. Nobody's seen them. You're opening those up and looking through cards that nobody has
Right.
seen before, and it's just really crazy because then you're like, well, do I keep this one? I don't know what's coming, and you're everybody's on the exact same playing field there. I really encourage people to try Draft at Worlds.
Yeah,
Hollis,
draft
are you
is
back?
super good. He doesn't seem to be back yet. I don't see him in his video.
H. All right, moving right along. Do you have any tips for new players that are getting into the game right now?
That's a good question. I mean, I think the thing that's going to make you best at the game is just playing experienced players. Like you're going to get good at the game when you see other people who are good at the game playing the game, and that's not always possible. And it can also be very frustrating when you start playing people who are better than yourself, because you'll probably lose a lot, and who wants to lose all the time? That's not so fun. But I mean, the core set is still a great starting point. Pick up a core set, just try it out. Looks like Hollis is gonna try to get back in here, but
Are you there, man? Feel free to just say hello or something.
he'll probably tell us. But
Oh.
I think, all right, he said be right back. So he's going to try to restart the computer, I guess. But I think as far as new,
the screen go all wonky now.
yeah, as far as new players getting into the game, like just definitely pick up a core set. Like it'll give you a good taste of what the game is like. And if you like the gameplay in the core set, like you're going to like the gameplay that the rest of the packs give you. And if you don't, and it's not for you, then like there probably aren't a lot of cards that are going to change the experience that you're having. But I will say, like it's tough because like a lot of times you'll have new players be like, the corp always wins or the runner always wins, and they're looking for kind of, I won't say excuses, but they're looking for flaws in the game rather than flaws in their own play. And sometimes it's a missed rule or something like that. But if you're a new player getting into the game, like just stick with it. Like if you play with people who know what they're doing, they'll point out anything. Like the community is so welcoming. Like if there's a game night in your area, like just go and you'll probably have a good time, and you'll probably pick up some tips and learn some things and see if you're actually playing anything wrong. But I think the core set is definitely still the best starting point. Obviously, you can't not have it really to play because of the good cards in there, but I don't think you need to like go out and buy everything to start with.
Right.
The great thing about the LCG format is like you can pick up the cards that you want and the cards that you need for the decks that you want just by kind of browsing and figuring out what packs they're in.
Speaking of game formats and things like that, is that something that or what am I trying to say? There's a Game of Thrones card game out there published by Fancy Flight, and you guys do a competitive multiplayer
Right.
for Game of Thrones. The original Netrunner, I think it had this big sellout format
Right.
multiplayer. Have you guys experimented with bringing that in back up to speed or respinning that?
I mean,
Or no?
there
Is
have
that
been-
is that a no comment question?
I mean, it's kind of a no comment question. You never want to say never. I feel pretty happy with the two-player experience with Netrunner, and anytime you begin to add more players to the mix, like it's going to change the game, and it's going to make it something that it wasn't intended to be at its purest form. That doesn't mean that it couldn't be a lot of fun, but that's not something that kind of that we're probably interested in exploring anytime soon. Like the game is a two-player game, Corp versus Runner. The Runner is the lone hacker, standing up for himself, or maybe just trying to make a buck. But I think anytime you bring multiplayer into it, like you're going to have to start. Teamwork is one thing, and politicking is another thing. But I think it fundamentally changes the game, and it doesn't mean it can't be done and can't be done well. But I'd rather leave that up to the fans to figure out for the time being.
Cool. I think that that answers that chunk of questions. In this new cycle, we saw a new style of Jinteki ID. Is there anything you could tell us about the design process behind coming up with that mechanic? Is that something you've been waiting a long time to do? Is that something we'll see again? Is that...
Yeah, I mean, one thing I've been really cognizant of throughout the design is the complexity that you add to the game through the cards, and I didn't want to add too much complexity too quickly. Before you know it, like all these extra keywords and rules and things are adding up, and it just makes it a headache for a new player who, has like the core game, and they come to their game night and they start playing and they're like, what does that do? What does that do? What does that do? And they just feel like they're playing a different game. So, we want to make sure that the gameplay experience kind of remains consistent and that we don't introduce too much complexity too quickly. In this case, it felt like the right time to kind of try out a slightly new take on an ID, a double-sided, double-faced ID. And, I imagine most people would have expected something that just kind of flips back and forth from one side to the other. And that's definitely something that we could explore in the future, but it didn't feel Gentech enough. Like it was much more exciting to do one where we are actually using all 3 copies of an ID that we put in a pack, because most people are like, well, why are there 3 copies of it? Well, there's 3 copies of it because that's how we print the cards, and that's how we put them in the pack, and also allows you to put 2 IDs in one clear sleeve so that you never shuffle it into your deck accidentally, which is kind of a nice perk. But that 3rd copy usually is just kind of sitting around in a binder or a box somewhere. And so this was, a way to kind of be like, well, we do have 3 cards here, so why restrict ourselves to just one flip? Why not do something a little bit more exciting? And so that was something that was a little bit controversial, just because I'm like, I don't know if I want to introduce something that's, quote, a little bit more complex at this stage of the game, but I think we can begin to take a little bit more risks now that we have a larger established card pool.
Right, because when you introduce currents, you pretty much have what they do on the card, right? Like, you don't need to look this up in a rule book or something like that. It's pretty standard on there. But with that ID, if somebody shows up, it's they can't just be like, oh, can I just read that card for a second? And you're like, no, you can't, because there's something on the back that
you can read the front of it, you just can't read the back of it. I mean, I think it's mostly self-explanatory, but obviously there are a couple of things that you have to figure out how it works, and what you're able to swap to, and things like that. But yeah, I think you're right. Like, some people point to currents as kind of like additional complexity or additional rules overhead, but like it's kind of written on the card. And that's one of the things that has always been awesome about Netrunner and has really surprised me about the system, is that it's very resistant to adding keywords to the game. And when you think of keywords, you think of a word that just appears on the card by itself, and it does something, but it's not written on the card. And so many of the things that I've wanted to do in the game, it's like I don't need to use keywords. I can just use rules text, and it works really, really well. Like currents. Like, you could totally have a current keyword, but, it's only 2 lines of text on the card, so let's just put it on the card and save ourselves the trouble of having to look stuff up in the rules, which I don't find very exciting. And I think some card games just use keywords a little bit too much and too frequently.
Just as a housekeeping rule, there's been a couple people in the chat that have asked questions regarding something about turntable. We've made a pact before that we don't talk about future stuff. We can't get into that stuff with Lukas, and he usually doesn't make a point to speak to cards that aren't released or speculative. Is that
Chrome City? Yeah, speculative cards. Yeah, I don't really answer rules questions for cards that aren't officially released yet. But I imagine we'll be seeing that card pretty soon here, and you can send in a rules question on the FFG website.
Hollis, welcome back. You have anything you'd like to add in before your mic cuts out again?
I'm so happy that it's working. I have no idea why it wasn't. Anything else to add? So I will say that at every premiere event that I've gone to, and this is like looking especially at nationals and worlds, FFG seems to, of course, do their own, sort of like commentary and feedback. And of course, you have people, you have the fan community also that does their own commentary. So I'll ask, because it's shameless, have you guys looked into reaching out to any of the community groups, like A&R Bad Publicity, in terms of doing the commentary, let me fix that tie, for doing commentary for the games that occur at Worlds? I really, given the fact that the community is doing so much support already for the game, do you guys plan to use the community also to support your game officially at any point in time?
I mean, that's definitely an interesting idea. I don't really know exactly what the details are for streaming at Worlds this year. I could see that opening a bit of a Pandora's box where, if you have a lot of people wanting to do it, or, a lot of kind of pillars of the community kind of volunteering, and then there's only so many games that you could stream. You want to create a situation where someone feels slighted. Obviously, you also don't want to feel like you're slighting the whole community, and it's pretty awesome the, level of commentary and even streaming that you get in the Android Netrunner community. Like, it's really cool to see, and people do a good job. So I know the stream is definitely something that we're looking at improving on from last year, but I don't know what our exact plans are for that. But I'm happy to pass that along to the OP guys and let them know that people are interested.
Perfect. I'll always jump at a chance to share my golden voice with other people.
Right.
Speaking of Worlds then, so is it safe to say that really the only thing that you know is that you have to work Saturday and Sunday?
Yeah, probably. Yeah, haven't been keeping track of too many of the details, but it's in November, I believe, again this year, and hopefully I'll see a lot of the same faces that I saw last year.
Yeah, and then make sure, as a public service announcement, make sure you pre-register. It looks like pre-reg is mandatory.
That's right. We do have a cap this year. So make sure you pre-register and don't just show up on site.
Don't do that drive.
Right. No. It's probably a long drive for a lot of people.
Do you think we'll see adjustments to the tournament structure of Netrunner again?
I don't foresee any major adjustments to the tournament structure. I think the tournament structure works pretty well. I'm actually happy with the double elimination format for the cut. I think that's been a positive for the game. And it's a little bit harder to just rely on, having one strong side take you all the way to the end. And it also rewards, players for having a higher seed kind of coming out of the Swiss rounds. So I don't foresee any major changes. Obviously, no tournament system is perfect, but at the end of the day, you're just trying to find, the best player there that day. And I think the current one does a good job of that.
Hollis, we got any other questions out there?
Looking at my filter, some of these I think have already been covered, and I don't want to ask again. So unless the chat comes up with a lot of questions really, really quickly, I think I'm good.
Lukas, is there anything that that we haven't touched on that you'd like to take this opportunity to hit out right now?
I mean, I guess I'd just like to say, thanks everybody for playing the game. It's pretty amazing to see just the level of community involvement and support and passion surrounding Netrunner. And it sometimes when you get into your own little work bubble, it's hard to remember that there are so many other people who are enjoying the game and like the game and playing the game on an even daily basis. It's pretty cool. Like, when I initially started working on the game, I never really imagined that it would kind of become our most popular card game that we put out. And I just kind of created the game that seemed fun and, tried to stay true to Garfield's original vision for the game while also, adding some new elements to it. And so it's been pretty exciting to see it grow over the years, and hopefully we still have a lot more growth to do. But, it's only going to happen if all the players stay committed and stay passionate about the game. And so far, it's been pretty cool just to see the community kind of come together and be a really welcoming and awesome place to throw down and run some nets.
Yeah, no doubt. But what's the future? What's the future for Double L?
That's a good question.
Are you holding down? Just are you too over immersed in Netrunner? I know you've dabbled in a couple.
I've done some other projects.
Side projects.
I mean, I'm actually going to be involved less with Netrunner. I've kind of actually had less of my time devoted to Netrunner this past year than at any other time in the game's life, and that will probably continue to kind of fall off as I pass the torch on to people like Damon and Eric and let them do some more of the heavy lifting. So I'm still going to be involved in the game, but kind of moving forward, I'm taking on more of a support role as I focus on other projects here at FFG.
Stuff that you also cannot talk about.
Yeah, stuff that I can't talk about.
So Damon is still involved? There was a question, someone asking if...
Right. Yep. So kind of the way that it worked for the Sansan cycle was like Dame and I would meet and we'd kind of discuss the overall vision, and we'd both throw cards in, and then I kind of refined those cards and did a lot of the development for future projects. It's still a little bit unclear exactly how everything's going to break down, but Eric Dahlman, who has worked on a Star Wars LCG, he's done a lot more of the development, and I've given Damon a little bit more of the design, so they've kind of tag teamed some stuff. But moving forward, I'll be less of like the lead designer and a little bit more of just a troubleshooter and a guy who's part of the team rather than the guy who, again, I don't really have veto power, but I had a lot of say in like every element of development. I'm kind of giving up some of that moving forward, and I think it'll be pretty exciting to see where they end up taking the game.
Well, you're still going to keep at least one toe in the pool, right?
Yeah, definitely. I want the pool to stay there, and don't want it to disappear on me.
Is it pressure now though? Like, like this is the first major thing to stamp your name on. Like, where does it?
Right.
Where do you go from here? Do you, I don't want to say like the the Donald X Vaccarino thing where he came out with Dominion and then.
I mean, he had Kingdom Builder. Like,
Yeah.
that's a pretty good game. And a couple of other releases.
Right, but are you are you worried that
I mean,
that this first time was such a crazy like the success of it must have blown you away, right? Like
Yeah.
you said, and are you worried that now everything you do is going to be compared to this game, like as the designer,
I mean, you can't worry too much about that. I mean, I don't expect to necessarily work on another project anytime soon that's going to, kind of top out at number 5 on the Board Game Geek rankings. I think it took a variety of elements to make that sort of success and critical acclaim possible and popular acclaim.
And that's
I
probably
suppose when
just
it
because
comes down
people
to
got
it.
lazy, right? And they just stopped rating it.
Right, yeah, exactly. I mean, I don't know why it's not number 1, to be honest. Like, what the hell happened? Why are we back at 7? Like, what happened there? Like, the game has only gotten better. Like, let's keep pushing that number up. But I mean, it is something that I do sometimes think about. Like, will I ever work on something that is kind of as impactful and well designed as Netrunner? And I am excited because, with some future projects, I'll have a little bit more control over the initial design. And obviously, Richard Garfield came out with this incredible game in the 1990s, and I was lucky enough to kind of update it. But, he did all the heavy lifting when it came to the actual game system originally. And so I look forward to kind of challenging myself and potentially doing some system design myself.
Would you look at yourself as like in the music industry or the Hollywood, where they come out with their blockbuster and now you've got more pull to do something else, and now you want to try like a whole different genre? Like, we've seen the card game from you. Like, is your next game have a board attached to it, or now you see Fantasy Flight going app based with the integration of XCOM? Do you think you'll try there, or like, or are you?
I mean, XCOM was one of the projects that I worked on the past year. It was kind of, Eric Lang did the initial design, and we worked really closely with him. And then myself and Nikki Valens at FFG kind of did a lot of the development work and kind of polished it up to send it out the door. So that was a pretty fun game to work on. And, there were a lot of creative challenges with trying to figure out how to integrate the app and make sure that it hit the right notes and it wasn't too gimmicky and it wasn't too much of a game. So that was pretty exciting. But as of right now, I'm actually working more in the board game department than the card game department. So it is possible that you'll see some more stuff with boards on it in the future.
Does that mean we could possibly expect future work on an Android Netrunner board game designed by you?
I mean, never say never. That'd be pretty cool, I'd imagine.
Cool.
What's some of your interests outside of Netrunner then, and outside of the Fantasy Flight design house? Are you you said you play Hearthstone, but where's your other gaming roots?
Right. Well, man, that's a big question, man. Gaming. I guess gaming kind of started, back when I was a kid, and board games were kind of always there. Axis and Allies was probably the first meaty big box game that I kind of got into, and I would play it with my dad and my cousin and uncle, and we'd get into that a lot. So, that kind of a little more mass market chits and plastic soldiers sort of war game will always have a special place in my heart. I think those are great. Like War of the Ring is kind of like the new version of Axis and Allies as far as I'm concerned, as far as this epic game that you can play for a couple hours and it's always going to tell a different story. Like that game's amazing. But, I do feel a little bit like I'm stuck in a time loop where I work and I play all these FFG games, but like my gaming knowledge of the industry is like circa 2010 when I got hired. And so I'm like, oh, look at when did this game come out? Oh, it came out in 2012. What? That's like 3 years ago. I thought it just came out. Like, this is new. I haven't played this one yet.
Do you show up at the office and you're like, I've got this amazing idea. It came to me last night. And they're like, yeah, that game came out last year.
Right. Yeah, I know. I mean, it's crazy. It's pretty cool to see the number of games being produced each year. Like, we're truly in a golden age, I think, of board gaming and tabletop gaming. It's pretty exciting to be a part of it. Yeah. And, you're also seeing a lot of growth and, stuff like Hearthstone and League of Legends and Dota 2 and kind of esports in general, which is also pretty exciting. And I think it, helps legitimize something that has always been a little bit seen as like a niche hobby or for like, people playing in their basements or something. And, that's not the case. Like gaming is for everyone. Like everybody can enjoy a good game.
No doubt. Go ahead.
I've got some questions I want to just rapid fire off here because I want to make sure I don't miss anyone. Sorry, I got to go back. Oh goodness.
What is a ruckus fox?
Rukasu fox. Yeah, so one of my best friends in high school was named Luke, so we were the Lukes kind of, and he was studying Japanese, and since Japanese doesn't have an L in it, he's like, well, I'm Ruku. That's Luke in Japanese, and you would be Rukasu. That's like the closest we can get to Lucas in Japanese. So I just kind of started using that as my screen name online because it was kind of distinct and unique for the most part. But it also just was part of my identity at the time. I'm not really into like a lot of anime or Japanese stuff, so it doesn't really have any meaning other than it sounded cool and I like the sound of it.
Mm-hmm. Then my last rapid fire question, this is coming up a lot in the chat. It says, when is Jameson going to get his own runner ID? That's just what the people want.
Yeah. I mean, that's a really good question. I actually ask myself that every night. But
yeah,
I haven't not made Jameson's ID yet. Like, what is going on here? I forgot again for the 7,234th day in a row. Like
looking
my whole
in the
life.
chat.
Just what the people want. I ask the hard questions.
Where did you see that? Where did you see that? I'm looking in the chat. I don't.
Well, it's probably up, but you can't get to it.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many questions coming in, you probably just missed it.
Raitza asked, oh goodness gracious, were there any cards or playstyles in House at FFG that you feel are very heavily underrepresented in the current meta?
I mean, it's so hard. Like, can you even define the current meta? Like, it's such in flux, and there's so many good deck builds out there, from Butcher Shop and Nearpad out of NBN to, Argus Security potentially. Probably not too many people playing it, but I think there's some good Scorched options. Most people play Blue Sun out of Wayland, and RP is obviously incredibly strong still. And I mean, who can count out Engineering the Future? Like, if that's not the strongest ID power in the game because it's gonna fire almost every turn, like, I don't know what is. So, man, I don't even know what's underrepresented other than, certain cards, but I feel like every faction has a really strong ID that they can pull on to play in a tournament. And I think part of it is just kind of guessing predicting what you're going to go up against, and that'll kind of decide what you should play and what matchups are going to be a little bit more viable for you. But, man, the meta is so diverse right now. There's nothing that really springs to mind. Like, I can't believe people aren't playing this sort of deck. Like, I think it's pretty exciting.
I found one up here. You want to talk about the rotation? Do you think the 5-year rotation is enough to keep the game fresh? And then in lines with that, when something gets rotated out, are you planning to make a new version of it?
I mean, that's a good question. Like, will we see Jackson Howard 2.0? Who doesn't want to see Jackson Howard 2.0
Please.
in the game?
Uh, please, and can it be neutral and one influence?
What about zero influence? I mean,
Rip.
I mean,
No.
come on.
No.
Let's give everybody their 3 influence back. Rotation is definitely going to be a challenge. Like, in some cases, it makes the card pool smaller, so like it's easier to test. But in other cases, like it's going to completely shift the meta just by having cards leave, and so it's going to be more difficult to kind of figure out where everything is from a power level moving forward. So I think having the card pool grow to the extent that's going to grow before you rotate is a good idea. But once it starts going, like I don't think it will feel like slow. Like I think it'll feel pretty fast when you're losing 2 cycles per year as we pump new ones out. So I think rotation is definitely going to extend the life of the game. It's good for the long-term health of the game. It's definitely going to shake things up, and I'm pretty excited to have it happen.
Is heap order ever going to matter?
As far as I'm concerned, it shouldn't. Like I put it in there because that's kind of how it worked in the original game, and you'd have cards that cared about like the top card of the runner's heap, but I think it's just a lot to keep track of, and I don't want to penalize people for just accidentally shuffling their heap or trying to make sure they put it in the same order. Like it just seems like a lot of overhead, and so I won't say we'll never do something with it, but like so far I haven't wanted to do anything of it with it just for logistical reasons. Like it seems a little bit unnecessary.
Lucas, the next answer you give will be the one that will live with me for the rest of the game. Are you ready?
Okay.
I want you to know that this is going to be watched quite a few times, and whatever you say right now, you'll be held accountable for. You ready?
I'm ready.
Is it Katie Jones or Cotty Jones?
Oh.
It's Katie Jones.
Bam! That's it. Cut it. We can end the episode now. Can we end the episode? We're done. That's all we
Yeah,
need.
that's it. Drop the mic. Yeah,
Man.
there's definitely some differing opinions even on the design team about
Yes.
the pronunciation of that name, but as far as I'm concerned, it's Cotty Jones.
Is there any hidden Easter eggs in the art that nobody's picked up on yet that you can reveal?
Ah, man, I mean, I feel like you guys are pretty smart and find most of them. We did do something early on with some of the initial FAQs where we actually had interactive buttons hidden in them that kind of changed some things that nobody picked up on, so we just kind of stopped doing them. But as far as like actual cards and people kind of putting together like the different elements and the different people, like I think you guys have found most of the Easter eggs that we've laid. There's probably a few that you haven't, but nothing springs to mind as like, oh, I can't believe you guys haven't found it. And even if it did, I wouldn't tell you.
Appreciate it.
Lucas, what card do you feel is your most favorite? Two questions. What's your most favorite design of a card? And what do you feel is your best design of a card?
Wow. That's a tough one. If I say Caprice, everybody's going to hate me. But I also don't feel like that would be lying. I find it difficult to categorize things into like favorite or non-favorite. Like that's a very binary system. I think there's a lot of good cards and a lot of cards that I'm proud to have designed. So I wouldn't want to like point out one or two. I will say, like, for the last pack that came out, Breaker Bay, like London Library was a card that I had a lot of fun working with, and I feel like it hit all the right thematic and mechanical notes. Like, it's a very interesting card to play with, and it also, was kind of inspired by like what happens when you check out a program from the library and then you have to return it. And so I would say, like, that's a good example of a card that I feel like it worked. Like it was a card that was a little bit more complicated than I usually like to make cards, but like it came together really well, and I was glad to be able to fit it into that pack. But when it comes to like overall favorite cards, like that's just too tough. Like we're talking about small degrees of separation here, and if I did have a favorite, like I wouldn't even know what it was.
It's like asking a parent who their favorite kid is.
Oh, no, it's always
Oh,
easy.
that might be a little bit easy. Yeah, I mean, you probably only have a couple of kids. Is it Jimmy or Tony or Frank or whatever? That's easy compared to like a couple hundred cards.
You see anything else here, Hollis?
I didn't actually. It looked like the majority of the questions that we could ask have been asked now.
Yeah,
Awesome.
there are some that we just, we know what the answers are, and they're no
Yeah.
comment.
No comment. Yeah, I could just say no comment a bunch of times in a row. No comment. No comment. No comment. That should fix those.
Most of my notes are covered now.
Yep.
And let me just check one other thing here. Yeah, we are pretty much soaked a good chunk of your time up.
Yeah.
So that would you ever name a child Capstone?
That doesn't sound like a name.
Now it's just getting late.
Right.
And
Really scraping the bottom of the barrel there.
Lukas, thanks again, man. I really appreciate you doing this. Thanks for being so open to the community when we need you. And I can't say thanks enough.
Hey, thanks for having me. This was fun. I enjoyed it.
Number 100. We'll see you for episode 200.
All right, I'll be back.
And isn't this Easter egg? This is the second time you've been on Bad Publicity.
That's true. That is true. I haven't on once before.
So all those people can go back and try and
They better
find
watch
that.
the first 99 episodes. They should start with 99 and work their way backward.
Touche. I love the way you're helping us boost the views there. All right. Well, Hollis, you got anything else there?
You covered it for me, man. Just in closing, I said this before we actually went live because I didn't want to sound like a fanboy, but the truth is that you and your team are very much responsible for, a really fun activity that a lot of people enjoy playing. And I think you guys know, it's a huge undertaking. There's a lot of scrutiny, but I think there's less praise than what is deserved than what you guys receive for making such an excellent game. And you guys basically have given me something that I get to sink hours into that I really enjoy. And I'm certain everyone that's in chat and everyone that will listen to this later will agree. You guys have done excellently. So, just really thank you so much for being active in the community and being able to craft something that is so enjoyable and fun for everybody. I really appreciate it.
Yeah,
And Dan Dargenio says hello.
awesome.
Yeah.
He was waiting for a
He
shout
does say
out.
hello.
All right.
He does say
Hello, Medio X Core. Is that how you say his screen name? Hey, Dad.
Yes.
Yeah. World champion.
World champ.
So everyone, thanks a bunch for tuning in. Really appreciate your time as always hanging out with Bad Publicity.
Thank you, guys.